everybody. Welcome to the St. Louis Art Museum's Art Speaks program. My name is Kira Hageman, and I'm the Associate Educator for Teacher and Student Learning. Before we begin, please familiar yourself with the Q&A section located on your screen. Feel free to enter your questions at any time during the program, and we will choose a few to answer at the end. Also, there is a live auto transcription available for this program. Please click the CC icon to activate or deactivate the subtitles. For today's talk, Art Speaks, But You Feel Me, we're joined by Shaka Myrick, the 2021 to 2023 Romare Bearden Graduate Fellow. Thanks for being here today, Shaka.
Thank you for the introduction, Kira. And thank you all for joining me today for Art Speaks, But You Feel Me. Today, we will be looking at several works of art from Oliver Lee Jackson's current exhibition at the St. Louis Art Museum. We'll also look at a few works on view at other museums across the country. As the inaugural two-year Romare Bearden Graduate Fellow, I am compelled to discuss works by African-American artists, and specifically Oliver Lee Jackson, whose work is focused on abstract depictions of Black people and African-American experiences. His work is extraordinary because of his unique paint application and philosophy of making work. You'll see. Oliver Lee Jackson was born in 1935 here in St. Louis, Missouri. He began exhibiting his work in the mid-1960s, and at that time, he was active with community cultural groups in St. Louis. He served as assistant director of the People's Art Center from 1963 to 1964, and he became involved with the Black Artists Group, a multidisciplinary collective for Black artists that existed in St. Louis, Missouri from 1968 to 1972. Jackson's work often is large-scale paintings that blend figural elements of bodies, pointing, kneeling, drawing, and playing instruments with colorful abstract compositions on vigorously worked surfaces. Each painting creates a world of its own, captivating viewers and challenging them to spend time interpreting the work based on their own feelings and experiences. The St. Louis Art Museum has 12 paintings, drawings, and prints in total in this current exhibition, created from the mid-1960s to 2020. The work on display at the St. Louis Art Museum celebrates his aesthetic evolution over 5 decades and demonstrates his significance as a highly experimental artist working across a range of media. The exhibition has been on view since July 16, 2021, my first week as a fellow. And if you're in the greater St. Louis area, you can come and experience his work in person until February 20th, 10 days. As a reminder, abstract art is a non-objective style of art that does not attempt to represent any actual thing in everyday visual reality. Instead of using recognizable natural forms, abstract art uses shapes, colors, textures, and they convey thoughts, feelings, and spark open dialogue about personal expression. Abstract expressionism is a subset of this broad category. It is a post-World War II art movement in American painting. Abstract expressionism developed in New York City in the 1940s, and a lot of Oliver Lee Jackson's work employs one of the key features of abstract expressionism. That's the gesture. Think of the literal definition of gesture, expressing or emphasizing an idea, sentiment, or attitude. And with that in mind, gestural drawing, in short, is a style of mark making where the exact image isn't rendered in detail, but as an overall shape, signaling towards the actual figure. In my fine art courses at the University of Missouri-Columbia, I learned that gestural drawing was the vital foundation of work by famous artists in history. Oliver Lee Jackson's work is profound in that his mark making not only calls to traditional styles of drawing and painting, but the gestural foundation becomes crucial in the aspects of his work. This image, watercolor 8/22/89, number 2, was made in 1989, and it's a beautiful example of gestural expressive strokes on paper. At the lower half of the painting, multiple figures in varying colors and degrees of transparency seem to float on the page. The negative space between colors creates volume, which gives each figure depth. The gestural application of watercolor and each figure conveys an intimacy within the group. Several figures appear to crouch, cluster, and join around another reclined figure at the lower center. Their arched backs and curvilinear forms repeat throughout each shape in the total composition. These layered forms and colors bleed into each other in the lower quadrant, ultimately pulling the eye towards the edges of the painting. There's a sense of tenderness in Oliver Lee Jackson's watercolors, where the central figure, which is framed by green, holds the head of another figure lying in its arms. The affectionate posture in the face-to-face embrace of these two figures is intensified by Oliver Lee Jackson's application of watercolor. It creates a dreamscape across the canvas. There's a similar gestural figuration happening in painting 72503. And it's important to consider Oliver Lee Jackson's simple color choice in this image. His work generally does not uphold a particular message, narrative, or meaning, which is the true freedom of abstract expressionism. This image of what seems to be three seated figures emotes a kind of silence, quiet, or a moment of reflection. Based on the postures of the figures rendered in Black, the red shapes above could be thoughts, worries, decisions, or simply part of the background. Either way, the stagnant forms sit pensively on the ground next to each other. Do you feel brainstorming or teamwork happening? If not, what else do you see? There are no wrong answers. Number one is the first painting you see as you walk through Taylor Hall to the first section of the Oliver Lee Jackson exhibition here at the St. Louis Art Museum. It is big, bold, bright, and definitely my number one pick in this exhibition. Notice the handling of materials with different moves. There are gestural strokes that seem to be applied swiftly. They suggest a human form, but they don't quite take the full shape of a body. I think the hands and feet and a few heads are recognizable, and everything else is up to our interpretation. Oliver Lee Jackson has commented on how he creates emotion in his work during an artist talk at the National Gallery of Art. He described the moment he knows a work or of art is complete as a bell, a term to express how to evaluate the success of portraying emotions on the canvas. When done perfectly, the work, like a bell, will ding. But the feeling and the image have to ding together. So images can look a certain way and they can feel a certain way, but if they are not both working together, the true emotion isn't there. For me, this image is definitely dinging. Upon first glance, I instantly saw a couple holding hands, ascending to the sky, with a figure whose arms are widespread. It could be a guide, a god, an Orisha, who's to say? And there's a smaller figure floating within this mass that could be a child holding hands with an elder or parent, following them upward and onward. Whether it's an intimate gesture between lovers or a reminiscent moment of ancestry, is definitely a mood. There's a playful experimentation in this work, painting 12-15-04. Let's take a moment and really gaze at this work. How many moods can you feel as you scan the image? Think about it. I see tension on the left side of the painting with dark sweeps of yellow, black, and white blurred with pink and blue, creating a kind of center mass. For me, it feels like the anticipation of the moment before I yell surprise at a birthday party, or trying to hold in laughter when I know it's not appropriate for me to laugh. It's me trying to muffle my cackling, but I gotta let it out. Because one thing about me is, if it's funny, I'm gonna laugh. You feel me? The bright colors and shades of white on the right make me feel light. It's like the release from the tension on the left side, you know? And let's not ignore the element of what could be a cute little happy face cloud, slightly off-centered to the right. Can you feel the burst of energy like I can? Or do you feel something else? Let me know. Oliver Lee Jackson is using a similar style of abstract expressiveness in this oil on canvas entitled Alchemy. It's not as jolly as the previous painting, but it sure is powerful. First, let's address the definition of alchemy. Physically, it's an ancient chemistry rooted in the transformation of matter, particularly concerned with attempts to convert metals into gold. With that in mind, the color palette of this work is on point. Gray, black, and white splashes make more grays, and they all resemble the color of metal. Spiritually, alchemy seems to liberate the soul from its attachment to matter. Still very on brand. I'm seeing two figures attempting to meet in the center of the image, seemingly hinged to the borders of the canvas by dark blue and black paint. I feel like they're using all of their strength and all of their might to come together, and the energy between them is creating the white mass above them. The tension and alchemy and the other expressive works I mentioned are what create a variety of sensations in Oliver Lee Jackson's paintings. Remember, the implementation of abstraction in his work makes each painting open for interpretation. Line quality may be one of the most distinctive attributes in abstract expressionism. It has the ability to invoke structure, chaos, emotion, and by definition, line quality is how the marks are made on the paper. The weight, thickness, or thinness of a mark signifies the feeling of the work and sometimes the mood of the artist at that very moment. In this work, Intaglio Print 37, the line quality creates several distinctive moods. Oliver Lee Jackson used different methods of application to create this etching on paper. Let's get a closer look. Softening the etching marks by a process called aquatint, the strokes are altered from sharp lines like the scribble pattern when your pen is out of ink that you can see on the right side of the paper, to wide watery marks that you can see above. The differentiation of mark making in this intaglio print is going crazy. So many unexpected moments and shapes. I'm feeling it. Another work on paper and on view right now at the St. Louis Art Museum is one of Jackson's earlier graphite drawings, untitled Sharpeville series. It was made in 1966, and it was completed before the series of paintings with the same name that we'll discuss next. The title references a tragic historical event known as the Sharpeville Massacre that occurred on March 21st, 1960. I'm interested in this work in alignment with Black History Month, keeping in mind that African history is ultimately Black history too. It's all connected. In this carefully rendered drawing, the abstracted bodies are disconnected from a specific act, but they still have the power to provoke a visceral response from the viewer because of their dismemberment and fragmented postures. I'm feeling a sense of gore, horror, confusion that resonate clearly after learning the history of the events that happened at Sharpeville over 60 years ago. In the township of Sharpeville, South Africa, on March 21st, 1960, police opened fire into an unarmed crowd of African demonstrators who had marched to Sharpeville's police station to protest the system of colonial apartheid. 69 people were killed, 180 people were wounded, and that includes children. Does that sound familiar? This brutal violence was captured by photographer Ian Barry. Shockingly, these horrific images were seen around the world. The event became yet another symbol of struggle for freedom, equality, and justice against racist oppression and brutality. According to Oliver Lee Jackson, the desperate postures of the victims became a springboard for developing his body of work. Jackson was captivated by the gestures of the people photographed and how each person was seen in a state of duress and terror. These feelings inspired the creation of numerous drawings and paintings with forms derived from Ian Barry's photographs. Images from that event became a potent emotional source for him. The action of running, fleeing, falling, all in the midst of chaos motivated him to complete this painting. Even with that, the resulting works in the series have no obvious indication of this specific event in history besides the title. Though Sharpeville Series 8 registers Jackson's response to the images from the Sharpeville massacre, he was more interested in the inescapable violence rather than the history of this specific event. Ironically, beauty and violence can often be found together. Consider imagery depicting violence during the civil rights movement, and even lynching postcards. It's disturbing, but to Black people, it can be all too relatable and sometimes reality. With that, we can easily be desensitized, and that's why we can't help but absorb the trauma. In works from this series, Oliver Lee Jackson approaches the systemic violence that emerges from interconnected systems, like those in America, by highlighting the Sharpeville massacre of 1960 in connection to international violence. In the Sharpeville series, Jackson focuses on developing his own personal language of gestures that evoke intense, recognizable sentiments of urgency. This figure is derived from Ian Barry's photograph of a boy fleeing gunfire while holding his jacket above his head in a futile attempt to protect himself from bullets. Sharpeville Series 8 is also modified from the same series of Ian Barry's photographs. With close examination, the figure at the far left is painted without a lower leg, yet it appears to be running. That's what true gesture is. Meanwhile, the figure next to it is headless. At the right, the bent knee of a running body emerges into a blood-like red wash bordering the canvas's edge. This painting represents a grave sense of urgency and emphasizes the desperateness of the scene in fragmented gestures. I feel like if you're Black and living in America in the last 50 years, this horrific event is more than a narrative. It's a reminder of how far we have come as people, but unfortunately, the familiarity of these images aren't so far removed from us now in 2022. Social media has given us access to brutal acts against our ancestors and the very people who helped build this country, seeking peace and equality, just as the demonstrators of the Sharpeville massacre did. With that in mind, let us find beauty in pain and let it ignite change, but never become complacent or satisfied with inequality of any kind. You feel me? Oliver Lee Jackson's work is known for creating complex, layered images and figurative elements. His practice is informed by a deep understanding of global art history, from early modern European painting to African art. Yet his work does not aim to elevate a single message, narrative, or meaning. Instead, his work serves as an open invitation for close looking, giving the viewers the freedom to react organically to his paintings instead of immediately telling them what to see. Thank you for attending the St. Louis Art Museum's virtual talk on Oliver Lee Jackson's work. Happy Black History Month. And remember, art speaks, but you feel me.
Thank you, Shaka. That was great. So I think we have some time for some questions if people have those. So feel free to put questions in the Q&A, and we have a couple already. So one is, you speak so beautifully on the topic and clearly have done a lot of research. So there was a question about kind of what drew you to this topic, and if you knew when you started your position that you wanted to focus on this.
This topic, as an art speaks, what drew me to Oliver Lee Jackson's work particularly is that I wanted to highlight and break down abstract imagery. In my experience, sometimes art is a bit intimidating, and as you approach abstract art, you either think it is unreadable or it just is unreachable. I chose Oliver Jackson's work because it is exactly what I described: big, beautiful, bold, and there is you have a chance to create your own meaning. There's a freedom with his work. So no, I did not know that I would be choosing his work when I was interviewed for the position. But as soon as I came, again, the show opened my first week, I knew I had to represent for Oliver Lee Jackson.
Great, thanks, Shaka. And then this next question, I believe, is in reference to the image you have up on the screen. And the question is, are the pink portions of the red frame 3D materials?
Yes. Those portions are made of fabric. So there's paint on the outside of the frame, and there is fabric that Oliver Lee Jackson has attached to the work. He was inspired by several visits to Africa and decided to use cloth on the edge as a mixed media element.
Great, thanks. And then another question is, if you know where else the work can be found, so perhaps you could speak a little bit to what's in the museum, and then if you know other places or resources that people could look to.
Well, again, his work will be on view until February 20th. So there are 10 more days for you to see it here at the St. Louis Art Museum, and we are open. As far as new installations and if this work will travel, you can easily visit his website. And it looks like he has another show that ends February 20th in Napa, California. I'm not seeing many more shows at this moment. So if you're in California, check his work out. And if you're in St. Louis, come on down.
And then another question, so you spoke a bit about historical connections, particularly with one work of art. And we're wondering if you could speak a little bit more about sort of maybe other historical connections that he had, maybe between some of his abstract works, or if that's come up in your research at all.
You know, it has not. I was hoping to stress that most of his work is non-narrative, and even with the Sharpeville series, you would not know, maybe just by looking at it at first, that this is related to a massacre. The painting on the left is also a part of that series. And again, he did several drawings that are in a different gallery here at the St. Louis Art Museum. So to answer that question, from my research, we have the Sharpeville series here at the St. Louis Art Museum, and the rest of those works, mostly untitled or titled painting and the date it was created. They are all abstract, non-figurative works of art where we get to decide.
Yeah, great. And are you able to speak a bit more on the connection between Suggs and the artist?
Dr. Donald Suggs. Dr. Donald Suggs is an amazing man, vibrant, brilliant, has an amazing opinion. And actually, let's go back to the first question. He may have been the reason that I decided to do Oliver Lee Jackson's work. As we walk through the first gallery in Taylor Hall, where Kehinde Wiley, Glenn Ligon, some of those works, Dr. Donald Suggs had strong opinions in comparison. He is a collector, and he has collected many of these works. They are in his collection of Oliver Lee Jackson. He is a brilliant guy who knows his stuff when it comes to abstract art and what painting is, and what or instead of academic painting, he is drawn to abstract work, work that creates feeling and that you can sit in front of and find nuances and new information. He and I connected on the understanding that this work isn't confusing, it's beautiful, and it's work that continues to reward the viewer.
Thanks. So I think we have time for just about one more question. So there's a question about, do you know if this exhibit will be traveling and where it will travel to next?
Based on the website here, I am seeing the Andrew Cripps Gallery in New York. He will have works on view until April 2022. The rest of his shows end, it seems like a cycling out, February 20th, 2022. So if you're in New York, come on down.
So we've got a lot of thank yous, and one last question for you. Out of the works that you've seen and that you've talked about, is there one that you're particularly drawn to?
Number one is my favorite. Learning more about alchemy, I am more drawn to it. That is one of Dr. Suggs, a work that he has collected. And I would love to speak more with him about it, but I am drawn to the yellow and the ascending figure and the holding hands, the gesture. I just really, number one is my number one.
Well, thanks so much, Shaka. That was so great. I feel like we learned a lot. And thank you to everyone who joined us today. If you'd like to register to join us next Thursday, February 17th at noon to hear Philip Hu, the museum's curator of Asian art, discuss Japanese military art dating between 1894 and 1947 that reflects the militarized outlook of the Empire of Japan for half a century, feel free to register. So thank you all and have a great day. And you're getting lots of thanks in the Q&A.